Is the first New Deal. It's our first one on this unit, Roosevelt and the New Deal. Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1932, following his promise of a New Deal for Americans. In his first 100 days in office, he introduced a flood of legislation designed to rescue banks, industry, and agriculture and provide jobs for the unemployed. So the election of 32, what we looked at in our last unit was Hoover against Roosevelt, Roosevelt the Democrat, Hoover the Republican. Of course, Hoover was the incumbent. That means he was president when the election took place. He was also president when the Depression hit. The election came out as a landslide for Roosevelt. He won convincingly in both the Electoral College and the popular vote. In his first inaugural address, so he was inaugurated president, became president March 4th, 1933, he outlines his plan for action. And he immediately brought to the presidency a new feel. Rather than pretending that everything was okay or having people be afraid, as he said in his speech, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He brought courage and determination to the presidency. So some of the things in his first 100 days that he did include the following. He immediately called a bank holiday on March 6th, so 3 days later. He ordered the suspension of all banking transactions effective immediately. That's across the entire nation. For the rest of the week, Americans would have no access to banks or banking services. And what this did was this stopped the failure of banks. Remember, we were talking about bank runs in the last unit, and people lost all their savings and would lose all their money. And this was designed to stop that, stop the bank runs. And then 3 days after that, he signs the Emergency Banking Act. As soon as examiners found banks to be financially secure, banks would be allowed to reopen and be given additional funds from the Federal Reserve, so from the federal government, to cover withdrawals. In other words, banks that were financially secure could not lose all their money. And then a couple of months later, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was signed into law, where the federal government would guarantee bank deposits up at that time to $2,500, which would be the same as $44,000 today, $44,471 actually. The FDIC still exists, and your deposits are actually covered up to $250,000 per account today. He also signed into law the Homeowners Loan Corporation. This was a government-sponsored corporation designed to refinance home mortgages in default to prevent foreclosure. This allowed people to stop losing their homes. Then he put into place the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, or FERA, gave federal money to states to create unskilled jobs in local and state governments. Here's a picture of a FERA camp for unemployed women in Pennsylvania, teaching them typing skills. So they would teach them skills and give people who didn't have any skill, teach them a skill and get them jobs. And probably his most successful program in his first 3 months in office was the Civilian Conservation Corps. These were public works programs for young unmarried men ages 17 to 28. They would earn $30 a month. Now, to put that in perspective, the average wage for a factory worker was around $70. But however, that $30 would go farther than you think because they didn't have to buy food, housing, or clothing. And what they did was they worked outside. They built bridges, roads, and parks, and planted forests and forest protection. And actually, there are parks that we have in the state of Iowa today that were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. In its 9 years of existence, over 3 million young men participated. This was an opportunity for young men who had no opportunity for work of any kind to work outside and earn money and be part of a group and do something productive. He also created the National Industrial Recovery Act. This authorized the president to regulate business and promote fair competition. It created the NRA and the Public Works Administration, or PWA. The National Recovery Administration, the NRA, The goal was to eliminate cutthroat competition by bringing industry, labor, and government together to create codes of fair practices and set prices. This was to prevent competition that would ruin businesses and drive people out of work, and also prevent labor strikes for workers to demanding too high a wage. It was trying to bring some order to the chaos that the economy was under. The Public Works Administration engaged in large scale public works construction, like this bridge pictured here. So it provided much needed infrastructure, it gave people jobs, and it really helped bring a sense of hope for the country. It built large scale public works such as dams and bridges and hospitals and schools, spending almost $6 billion, which would be the same as $107 billion today. Pictured here is the Bonneville Power and Navigation Dam on the Columbia River in Oregon. So not only does it do provided needed services, but it also then this hydroelectric dam would provide uh, a great amount of electricity, really after it's built for free. He also set up the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was set up to protect investors and maintain fair and orderly markets. And remember, this was set up to correct some of the problems from the 1920s when people were buying stocks on margin and speculating, and it's one of the causes of the Great Depression. So this is set about trying to fix that. The Agricultural Adjustment Act reduced agricultural production by paying farmers not to plant on part of their land and to get rid of excessive livestock. Its purpose was to reduce crop surplus and therefore raise the value of crops. It was trying to there was a surplus in some farm products and trying to raise prices by eliminating some of that surplus. And he created the Tennessee Valley Authority. It provided navigation, flood control, electricity generation, and fertilizer manufacturing and economic development to the very poorest part of the country, pictured here, which is in Mississippi and northern Alabama and Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. At the time, it was some of the poorest people in the country, and this provided them jobs and electricity where they had none before, really provided a needed service for them. So this was an overview of many of the programs of the first New Deal.